Okay, hello guys, this is Lauren Barber with Peace at Home Family Shelter, and this is part 3 of our domestic violence training for medical professionals. This section will talk about how you can advocate for patients who you think might be going through this. It'll just give you some tools on how to talk to them. And kind of bring up the question. First, we're going to talk about the relevance. Why is this relevant to you as a medical professional? First of all, kind of a general statistic is that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience interpersonal violence in their lifetime, and that's from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence website. That's a commonly used statistic, and it's really alarming because we all know someone personally, professionally, neighbors, things like that. We all know people in abusive relationships, whether we're aware or not. And so that's why we're going to talk about some of the red flags. We already talked about some of the red flags in the last part, but just like kind of in a medical setting, what are some red flags there as well? So another reason why this is relevant to you is that domestic abuse is the leading cause of intentional injury to women in the U.S. And healthcare costs for domestic violence patients exceed $4.1 billion yearly, and this was from the CDC website. So why domestic violence training for you all? Why is it important just to have a general awareness on this topic? Because patients that you have, there will be, a large percentage of patients that you have that are going through this, and you might have a role in helping them escape that, and you might not, but kind of planting the seed and just making them aware that organizations like Peace at Home exist, and that you as a medical professional care, you notice, things like that really can help someone who's going through domestic violence. Especially, as we talked about earlier, a lot of times they may feel isolated, they may not have a support system, and so in your office, or whatever medical context this is in, it's kind of a neutral kind of setting. It's not like they're telling a friend, or it's not the same kind of feeling of like shame or embarrassment that might come along with opening up to a friend or coworker. It's kind of like you're kind of a neutral party, especially if they're going in because they're injured from, physical abuse. It's kind of a natural talking point in that case. So why domestic violence training? A study by Group Health Cooperative, this is several years ago, I believe 2011, found that domestic violence victims average more than 17 doctor visits a year, compared to an average of 10 visits for one comparison group and an average of 6 visits for another. So victims of domestic violence are, visiting the doctor's office more often, so you will see them more maybe than other patients. Let's see. Why domestic violence training? Like I said earlier, domestic violence victims are more likely to disclose information to a medical professional than, say, to maybe, someone at church or someone with a bias, someone like who had, like a friend who really wants that person to leave their abusive partner. The victim might not, talk to that friend because they may think, my friend doesn't understand all the barriers I'm facing, whatever. So they're more likely to disclose to kind of a neutral party, especially a professional. So you can validate a patient's experience and encourage them to take the next step. Just kind of name dropping Peace at Home, name dropping different organizations that can help them. We're all helping professionals. We're trying to do the same thing that you guys are doing, which is addressing people's needs. And so sometimes that kind of overlaps, and then we can, you guys can refer people to us, and we're all kind of achieving the same goal of helping people who need help. And so, yeah, so this is what I was talking about. The doctor's office is a good place to go because it's neutral and confidential. And it's not like telling your husband you're going to the police department. And this is a quote from a domestic violence survivor. An abusive partner, wouldn't suspect anything necessarily if their partner is going to the doctor. If they're going to the police station, that's a different story. So yes. Okay. And here's a quote from a victim of domestic violence. A nurse would look at me and know, what about the burn on my hand, the missing hair, the teeth? I waited to be asked, ask me. I'd tell them everything, look at the burn, ask me about it, ask. So it's like, there are certain people who, walk into those doors and want to be asked about what's going on. They want someone to notice. They want someone to care. They want to escape their situation, but they don't know how. And so if you as a medical professional, notice some signs, you can start that conversation. And depending on your role, depending on the patient that comes in, some patients open up about a lot of things. Some, not so much. Maybe you ask about it, or, bring it up, or bring up peace at home, and, they aren't really receptive, and that's okay. At least you brought it up and maybe gave them some exposure to our organization, and maybe in the future they can reach out. Because there's a big difference in them not knowing that Peace at Home exists, and then them, finding out, oh, there are organizations that will help me for free leave my abusive partner. That makes a big difference. And, some gears can turn in their heads of like all these barriers that they have. There are organizations that specifically address those barriers so that they can leave their abusive partner. And they can find out about our organization in the medical, setting that you work in. So some red flags to look for in the medical kind of setting is a chronic, vague kind of complaint of pain or illness, and there's no obvious physical cause, or they may try to explain what happened and it's not really adding up. It doesn't make sense. Their partner might, kind of be acting weird and talking over the patient. They might be explaining to you what happened and not letting the patient talk for themselves. The patient may downplay what happened. They may straight up say, like, it was my partner, but my partner didn't mean to. It was an accident. Like, sometimes my partner just gets angry, things like that. Let's see. Oftentimes, people in abusive relationships, there's a correlation between domestic violence and a woman in the relationship being pregnant. The abusive partner may not have wanted that baby, and they may resent the pregnancy and resent the woman. And there may be an increase in physical abuse during that woman's pregnancy. Let's see. Yes, the patient describes their partner a certain way that kind of sets off some red flags for you. And then what you can do, a lot of hospitals I know have a very bare minimum domestic violence screening, which is kind of the patient fills out a form, and I think the question is, do you feel safe at home, or something like that. And the patient can either check yes or no. If they check yes, no further questions are asked. If they check no, maybe one of the social workers will come and talk to them. So I think it is important for you in a medical setting, whatever your role is, to kind of understand this process and understand the procedures at your specific organization or your specific medical setting has for this for victims of domestic violence. And also just like connecting with the social workers at the hospital or clinic or wherever you work at, if there are medical social workers there, making sure they know this information, just kind of being aware of the process of like, how do we handle this if someone checks, no, I do not feel safe in my home. And if someone on the paper checks, yes, I feel safe in my home. Was it because, you know, their abusive partner was sitting there while they were, you know, filling out the paperwork? Is there a way you can talk to the patient by themselves so that they can give kind of an unbiased explanation of what happened, and can kind of give you more information if they want to? It's really difficult when, you know, the abusive partner is there, or that someone might be there that is the abusive partner's sister or mom. There are a lot of reasons why a patient might not disclose this to you, and they don't have to, but of course, this is all about, you know, increasing the chances that they feel comfortable talking to you about this if they need to talk to you about this, if something is really going on. And of course, you can refer people to a domestic violence organization. And a really important point is that we are not just a shelter, and I'll talk about that later. Also, safety planning is a bullet point on this slide. And that means, you know, you may have a patient, you know, over the course of several months or years, you're aware of what's going on. They trust you, they kind of disclose different things every time. You've built up kind of a relationship. Maybe you have an opportunity, maybe they'll tell you, you know, like, hey, I'm planning to leave, blah, blah, blah. You can help them with a safety plan. You know, a safety plan is, what are they going to do when they leave? What organizations are they going to contact to help them leave? Like, you know, what are they going to do for money? Where are they going to stay? What are their, you know, with their kids? Like, if they only have one mode of transportation, safety planning is helping someone figure out all of those factors. And so that is a really, really big way that we can support survivors of domestic violence when they're trying to leave. Okay, and then here are just 3 guidelines when you're talking to patients about domestic violence. So first is just be conscious of creating the right environment. And that means just being aware of who is in the room. You know, if their partner's in the room, you know, they're not going to say, yeah, my partner is abusing me, you know. 2, bring up the topic of domestic violence. You know, a lot of people going through domestic violence, they may not understand that they are. They may not have made the connection that, you know, they are in that group of people who are experiencing domestic violence. They, you know, may think it's normal, like I mentioned earlier. Yeah, so bringing up the topic in a casual way. You can bring it up bluntly, directly, indirectly. You know, you are capable of kind of reading the room and knowing who this patient is, and kind of like getting a read on like what would be appropriate. For example, like if a patient that you see typically shares a lot about their personal lives, you know, there may be more of a bond there that you can bring this up. If it's like a newer patient, that may not be as appropriate. You maybe could say something like, oh, that's a really big bruise, you know, like, or, you know, like just kind of like pulling it out of them a little bit in a tactful way. And just kind of like relaying the message to them that you notice that something's going on here and that you care. And then number 3, you can recommend resources, and that's a really big deal. Yes. Because a lot of people don't know that there are resources that exist for free for them, specifically them. Number 1, create the right environment. Like I said, wait for everyone to leave the room. You can tactfully ask, like, you know, like, I need to do a quick like assessment. Do you mind waiting in the waiting room? That's perfectly fine. The patient's friends, family, and partner are not interpreters. The patient needs to speak for themselves, and have the space to, be able to advocate for themselves. Also, utilize all the alone time you have with the patient to talk about this with them. Number 2, introduce the topic of domestic violence. Like I said, you are capable of reading the room and being tactful, however you think it's appropriate to talk to this specific patient. Make sure the patient feels validated and safe and supported. Body language is a big deal. If they feel like you're judging them, they're not gonna talk about something personal to them. So just having kind of a neutral, professional demeanor, of course. Also, if you ever get in a situation where you are talking with a patient, about more personal details, it's really important your stance on the matter. So this bullet point, the third one, says affirm the injustice, but do not insult the abuser. And that kind of means agree with the patient or bring it to the patient's attention, this is not right. You shouldn't be like getting hurt like this. They shouldn't be treating you like this, things like that. But there's a line. It's not helpful to specifically insult the abusive partner, because a lot of times the victim will feel the need to advocate for their partner because they know, first of all, they might be embarrassed, they want you to know the reasons that they have stayed so long, or the reasons that they're, still there and that they haven't left. And they do have their reasons why they have stayed. They may be completely stuck and not able to leave. They may be holding on to hope that their partner will change and have invested so much in their partner already. They may love and care about their partner, even though the partner is very hurtful and harmful to them. So it's just important not to insult the abuser, or the victim will spend their time, trying to explain the reasons why they've stayed, what are good things about their partner, try to convince you like, no, they're not bad all the time, or, whatever. And so it's just best to avoid insulting the abusive partner, and just kind of addressing the abuse kind of in general, and making sure the patient doesn't feel ashamed for staying with their partner. They may have kids together. There are a lot of reasons why someone would stay with an abusive person, and we covered that in the last section. So yeah. And we want the patient, we want this person, to feel safe talking to us, and we want to be like good listeners, and not try to use a tactic of like, shaming them or whatever to kind of spark them into action. They need to come to the realization on their own, that they need to leave, and that they're able to. So yes, avoid victim blaming and negative messages. And then, like I said, body language is really important. Also, yeah, just use tact. You can kind of read the person. If the person, seems really insecure and shy, having this conversation with you, don't ask a ton of blunt questions, so that, the patient might shut down and not want to talk anymore. So if you see that patient regularly, you can kind of pace it out every, appointment that you have with them. You can kind of, get to know them more and things like that. So yeah, just use tact. And an important point that I mentioned earlier is that some people do not understand that they're being abused. It may be so normal, it may have happened so gradually. They may not have a support network and may be pretty isolated, and so they don't have anyone from the outside seeing the relationship and saying, wow, like that person is not treating you correctly. They may really not know, and be so thick in the dynamics that they just don't see it like that. And so for people like this, bringing up the topic of domestic violence might be alarming and it may startle them. They may feel defensive, they may not agree. So yeah, just whatever part of the journey this person is on, just, be able to interpret that and kind of fit in like where you can with that. So they may not be ready, to talk about it, but yeah, so just be aware of each patient's case. And this is another quote, a reason to ask about domestic violence in a medical setting. The reasons to ask about domestic violence are to educate a patient and to open the door so that the patient knows that they can come to you. It is part of developing a real relationship with your patient. Over time, you might be able to uncover the abuse and improve their safety, but you also might better understand why they're having symptoms and how to better approach self-management of their illness. So, we care about the patient's well-being, physically, and also, are they safe at home with the person that they're living with their partner. And so it might seem kind of like distant from what you're kind of doing in the medical setting, but really it may be more connected than you think, because if that person is physically hurting your patient and that's the reason your patient comes to the doctor's office all the time, that is the root of the issue. And so referring them to an organization like us where we can help get them out of there, that person is safer, that person is healthier, and can live, a more fulfilling, happier life after escaping their abusive relationship. So it's all about just helping the patient. And then number 3, it is important to just recommend resources. There are so many people in this area who have not heard about Peace at Home Family Shelter. Just hearing about that one time for someone in an abusive relationship who they feel hopeless, they don't, maybe they've asked family for help, and their family doesn't have, money to help them move out of their apartment or their house or whatever. So if they hear, from a medical professional that there's an organization called Peace at Home Family Shelter that has this service, blah, 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 that person is way more likely to, just feel hopeful, like they can leave. They may contact us and they, may leave. A good example of this is I have a neighbor who is in an abusive relationship, and about a year ago, I left a note after her husband had left for work. I knocked on her door and left a little note. I put my name and number, what apartment I lived in. I lived right across from her. And I told her I worked at Peace at Home. And so the information, like it had the website and stuff, she like checked all that out. And then a few months later, she told me that she contacted Peace at Home. She's been in contact with them like for months, and kind of figuring out like how they can help her. And yeah, so she's going through a lot right now, and it's a process. It doesn't happen all at once. So don't be discouraged if you try to help someone, and don't take it personally, if they aren't ready or they haven't processed yet, like, oh, I can leave, or they may not have the courage or the confidence to, or they're experts on their own safety. They may know, it's not a good time. It might be a better time in 3 months. Maybe their partner is, going on a trip for work and for a week or something, and they have the chance to pack up all their stuff while their partner's gone and leave, so it's about timing and things like that. But yeah, don't take it personally, and don't be discouraged if they don't take your advice or whatever immediately. Just, it's about planting the seeds along the way, and just the exposure, that organizations like ours exist, and we want to help them for free. An important part of recommending us and other domestic violence organizations is that we're not just a shelter. A lot of victims of domestic violence might not like, that term. I mean, we are, Peace at Home Family Shelter, but we're more than that. Someone might not need a shelter. They may, have enough of an income. They may have their own place, whatever. But we also have other services that are very important, and I'll talk about those in part 4. So resources, we're we're not as much reliant on paper as we used to be. So a brochure isn't really necessary for a patient to take home, for example. First of all, if they take home one of our brochures, their partner might see it and, ask, what is this? So just having brochures like in the waiting room areas and different areas, they can look over it. If they're in the waiting room and their partner's not there with them, they can put it back, but they, still read the information. Just having our website, just knowing what our website is, what our phone number is, those are very important, things for them to know. Let's see. And yeah, and affirm your ongoing support. That, they're your patient and you support them through this journey. Okay. We are going to talk about Peace Home Services in part 4. So see you there.